Hello there, sword friends. This is going to be a brief review on a Dynasty Forge Daimyo series Tamahagane Katana. Now, before I go too far into the review, a couple brief disclaimers. One, these are my personal thoughts. Take them with a grain of salt. I'm not an expert, admittedly. Two, in fairness to Dynasty Forge, this sword is owned by a friend of mine. It's not my property. I'm not going to swing it around and break it into things, but it is a chance for me to show you a sword that you might not otherwise get to see. So this review is going to be briefer in nature than some of the others I've done. And also, I have to note that it might not be representative of every Dynasty Forge Daimyo series Tamahagane line. It was purchased a few years ago, new by my friend, and it sat on a shelf as a display piece for a number of years because of its price. It's too pricey for a lot of people to justify using. Anyway, it's a perfectly functional sword, but I have to acknowledge that what you might buy from Dynasty Forge today it could be different than what I'm going to show you in this video. I should also kind of put into context, this is not a disclaimer, but more of a let me outline what the market is for you, because $2,500 is what this sword retails for, and I have to frame my thoughts as a reviewer, or for the purposes of a review anyway, in that context. So this isn't a $60 mall katana, and it's not an antique Nihonto national treasure piece, but it is $2,500, and there's going to be certain expectations. Some people in the market expect perfection for $100 or $500 or $1,000. But I think a lot of people are going to expect really premium product for $2,500, and it's in the premium product category. $2,500 would get you some of the highest end stuff from Hanwei, some pretty high end stuff from Skydro, and both of those companies make similar products with, the advertised folded, special, maybe even Tamahagane line steel. I should also note that Tamahagane, it's important to know what is Tamahagane. That's basically an attempt at saying a traditional steel, the traditional steel that these Japanese swords were made from. And frankly, I don't know the truth behind that. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can think about Tamahagane, and even me as a hobbyist or enthusiast in this doesn't really fully comprehend what Tamahagane is, because there's a lot of different people that give a lot of different definitions. You have some folks that think of Tamahagane like, I don't know, say cognac, where it has to be made from these certain materials, from these certain regions, in this certain space, in this very traditional way, by authorized this and licensed that and spiritual this, and so there's a lot of things that can go into it, where realistically you then have Tamahagane that comes from a couple sources in Japan, and if it was not smelted in those particular places, it is not Tamahagane. And then you have other people that use the term a little bit more loosely, where Tamahagane is made from materials like this, and it's made in this fashion, and if they can reproduce it in their home areas with the same type of iron sand and the same type of smelting techniques, then that's Tamahagane. But those two definitions are a little different, and so I'm not exactly sure if this is or is not Tamahagane. I haven't been able to find any research on where the steel actually came from. But if they're saying Tamahagane, I'm guessing it is hammered out from some sort of special steel. Admittedly, though, I have no way of verifying that. It's supposed to be something that you're paying a bit more money for, and I don't have any way of verifying that. Now, that isn't a kick to Dynasty Forge. This is really the first Tamahagane type of sword, production-wise, that I've done any kind of review on. And while others advertise it, I have no way of verifying it from them either, or how they define Tamahagane, or what that means. Is it as a house-made steel that they're doing that, by the strictest definitions of some folks that wouldn't qualify as Tamahagane, or did they actually go and buy the jewel steel from an authorized smelter in Japan? I don't know, and I frankly don't really have a great way of finding out. But if you know, go ahead and throw it down in the commentary below. It would be interesting to know. Lord knows you're paying a little bit more money to have the Tamahagane thing stamped on this sword, or have it be from that series. So is it worth the money? Is it different? That's something I really can't answer. But I'll draw attention to it and discuss. Now I'll get into the actual fittings themselves, and let me start with the kashira. So the kashira, and the thing I'm noticing about the fittings, the Fuji kashira, and really the whole thing, I know I said kashira first, but bear with me, is that they're not really very good. They're not bad either, but again, $2,500 sword, you're kind of expecting something really detailed, really crisp, maybe something hand carved and simple, or something cast but really detailed and ornate with very good execution, and this is not either of those things. The casting quality is okay, it's It's not bad, but then we can go to the assembly side of things. And I think, again, at $2,500, you're expecting a lot. This is passable. It's not bad in the way the kashira is tied on, but there's a little bit of an overlap here and a little bit of ledge there, and some of those details just are missed a little bit. Then we can go on to just the ito itself. The ska, it feels actually reasonably good in my hand. The silk is comfortable, it's soft, it doesn't feel plasticky and crappy, but the ito is also not very tight. And that's a bit of a downer as well. It's not so loose that I'm worried about it from the practices of hada or general use, but it does feel loose enough that it would wear out pretty quickly, and this would likely need to be rewrapped if it's something that you intended on using a lot. Then we can go up to the fuchi area again. The shape of this guy isn't bad, but the transitions and stuff, it's just not great. The tsuba is a simple wheel tsuba. It's simple enough. It's not super detailed or crisp. I like that it's smooth enough and it doesn't bite into my fingers or anything like that, but at the same time, it's not very intricate and not extremely well executed either. It looks very similar to what you would get on a Hanwei Practical Plus, and that's a $200 sword. Practical Plus, I think is the thing. It's just a very simple tsuba, very simple design, and there's not really a whole lot more to say about it. It's not loose, it's not messed up or anything like that. It's not crooked or on wrong, but at the same time, just very rudimentary. And then we can go to the habaki. The habaki is this kind of simple brass habaki. It's got a little bit more color to it than the average, but at the same time, it's really rough and really basic. And the habaki is an important part, but this looks very reminiscent to what you would get on a cold steel sword. I think these are made actually at the same forge, so you can see that the forge is capable of a lot more, but these habaki are just really rough, and it doesn't hold actually very well in the saya. The koiguchi area on the saya, if I move in that direction, is just a little loose, and it looks very poorly executed, frankly. The saya itself is a gloss black saya. The lacquer work actually looks reasonably well. From a show perspective, it looks perfectly fine, very simple again and elegant. But at the same time, the habaki falls out and the saya rattles a little bit. The saya basically looks to me like they assembled it before the blade was made, and they tried to make the blade to as close an exact specification as possible, but how are they doing that if they're starting with little moon rocks? Isn't there enough variation? And at $2,500, isn't it justifiable to say you should make the saya on the blade so it fits right and it doesn't wiggle around a little bit? Again, just at $2,500, execution is I think something that you're expecting in terms of refinement, and I think it misses the mark a bit here. There we go. I mean, that's the outside of the sword, and basically to this point I've been pretty critical. I'm not terribly fond of the fittings themselves. The ito's a bit loose, the saya is wiggly and doesn't hold on, and there's all this stuff that I really think is not great, and basically I think that the next part will kind of be the opposite, and that is the blade, the pokey stabby part, the things that people are actually interested in hearing me talk about, and why most people frankly are buying this sword, the blade. So shape-wise, it's very pleasant. It has a very nice shape for doing kata. It has a very nice shape for doing any kind of cutting, and on top of that, that profile, just the hamon and how the blade looks is great. If I compare it to what the website showed like a hamon that looks slightly more organic. This one doesn't have that same type of organic feel. It looks a lot more uniform, almost like a template was used, but I'm not going to really let that distract. That might be intentional, and frankly I think it looks good. The hada is bold and it has a lot of stuff to see in it. It's really pretty. I have to get it in the right light to really show it off, and that's what I'm trying to do in some of this camera work. But man, there's a lot to see in the blade. It's a beautiful looking blade. the polish on the Kasaki is one of the best that I've seen in a production sword. And I should preface that I mean, it's not as great as a fine art polish, but this is one of the best polishes I've seen on a production sword. Especially in the Kasaki, it looks like it's done reasonably well. Is it perfect? No. But is it quite passably good and what I would probably expect? Well, it's better than what I've seen on other $2,500 production swords. That's, I guess, what I can say. I don't know if it's that it's the best as much as it's a lot better than its competition, especially if I look at some of what I've seen from Taisuki or Hanwei in their high-end swords. They miss the mark quite a bit more than this does on the Kasaki polishing, burnishing type situation. Then if I go on to how the sword feels in my hand, now I have not handled it a lot because it's cold as balls and snowy outside, and I haven't really, it's not mine, frankly, and it would be rude to do so. But from the minimal amount of handling that I've done with the sword, just so I could give you some observations, it feels fantastic. It feels really great in the hand. If I close my eyes, I like it a lot more than I do when I open my eyes, because it feels very controllable. It feels quick and agile and light and lively. It's a very well thought out, very executed in terms of balance blade. The point of balance is about 4.5 inches up, which is pretty low for a 29-inch blade, and that maybe contributes to it having this feeling of easy to control tip and liveliness. I really feel like I'm in control of the tip of the sword, and I could put it exactly where I wanted it to, or where I wanted it to be. It also has a really nice tsuji. It's easy to make, and you can kind of see from the flicking around that I'm doing that it's a nimble little blade despite being 29 inches long, which is a pretty good sized sword. And that's kind of what gives me, well, at $2,500 you shouldn't have to do anything, right? You should have a sword that's ready to go. And I don't know that I've necessarily got that from just about any sword. The Citadel was maybe the rare exception of that, but the Taisuki sword that I looked at, that was all fancy-pantsy, that one was bulky and basically needed to be remounted to really be a great sword, and this is in the same boat. Frankly, I think that the fittings and whatnot are beneath this sword. The sword itself is fantastic, but in order to make it really be a fantastic sword, it would need to be mounted up in such a way that all those details are really going to be taken advantage of. Now, in contrast to other swords, this doesn't feel bulky or heavy, or like, you know, it's a big sword, but, you know, it feels lighter. It's 2 pounds, 1 ounce, which is not terribly heavy. It's kind of in the medium range wise. It feels like an iaido, frankly, which it's a little heavier than that, but not necessarily terribly much. And I mean, overall, I would just love to see how it feels if somebody took this and put a new saya and new tsuka on it. I think it would be an amazing sword, a really great feeling blade if that were the case. And unfortunately, it's not, and that might cost, you know, another $1,500 or more to have done. So is it worth like $4,000 to have it all assembled and done? Well, at that price, you can get some pretty fancy custom swords that aren't, you know, mass produced. And I think that's what it would take to be in competition with them. Now, that said, $4,000 still would probably not get you very many custom swords that were folded, and especially not from a Tamahagane type of steel. And they might not get you, you know, the same features that this sword has, but you would at least get one from a custom smith. And you also can find a lot more options available at $4,000 for Nihonto that's in a better type of mount. Now, in contrast to those options, though, I haven't had many swords from a custom manufacturer that have felt really light and lively like this one does. And Nihonto is not guaranteed to feel light and lively and great either. So you do get that. If your intention was to have a really pleasant feeling with some artistic quality sword to do a lot of kata or forms with that was still a shinken or still a live blade, this is not a bad option for that. As stupid as that might sound to you when I tell you how bad everything feels or how bad everything looks and that it costs more money to fix. But how pleasant the sword is handling wise makes me think that it would be a really great option if you know that you get a blade that you know is going to feel good. That's worth something, especially if you do a lot of kata or a lot of iaido, and you want to have a live blade to do those things. This one would sing in your hand if it were mounted better. As it is right now, I don't think I would really recommend it, though. At $2,500, unless you're willing to take on that type of project or you're really in love with how the steel looks, there's really not a whole lot about it that strikes me as fantastic. Now, that said, you know, shameless plug here, I am selling it on behalf of a friend of mine, It's up on eBay. Who knows if it's still available by the time you get around to watching this video. But if you can score one secondhand, then it might make it even a little bit more justifiable to have remounted. But I guess I would say, if you're buying the sword brand new, know going into it that the assembly characteristics of the sword miss the mark, but the blade itself is fantastic. And so if that's where your priorities are, then it might not be as bad a deal. I would say, before spending $2,500, this sword felt very, very similar to the Golden Eagle Daimyo series, and the difference is that isn't made from the Tamahagane steel that this one is. Without being able to verify what steel they use, you might want to look into that more before you spend more money on it. The Golden Eagle from that series from Dynasty Forge had a very similar, very pleasant feeling. I think I like this one more, and at the time I did actually have both of them side by side to test, and I like this more, but that could be because the Golden Eagle mounts are a little different and the handle on that one was a little different. So who knows, I didn't hold the bare blades in my hand comparatively, but I would say that Dynasty Forge Golden Eagle also felt really amazing in my hand, as does this one. So if you were going to remount it, you might be able to save yourself some money doing the Golden Eagle if Tamahagane doesn't really mean a lot to you. Anyway, that is all I have for you. I've rambled on long enough. I hope it's been helpful. And as always, cheers and thanks for watching.